that balance between social justice and productivity and how you treat workers in a decent and human way.
Mm-hmm. Moving forward now, Ansel Roger, you cannot speak on behalf of Ansel Roger, but you were present on Monday when that letter was delivered. You were also present when the media asked whether or not there's any possibility of the unions collaborating with the United National Congress. And Mr. Roger responded by saying that there are all kinds of possibilities. However, the unions are really focused on the issues of the workers right now. But according to news, OWT members were seen walking hand in hand with local government election candidates in South. I believe that was yesterday or the day before. What currently is the relationship between the unions and the opposition party, as well as the relationship between the unions and central government?
All right, let me address that issue. It is unfortunate that we make a big issue out of this when the headline was union considers the possibility of joining UNC at this election. Unions, which union considered that possibility? The Joint Trade Union Movement, and I can only speak for NATUC, the National Trade Union Movement, was there to deliver a letter which affects basically the poor and the disadvantaged. And we see that there is no conversation within the local general election that speaks to the problems that the unemployed, the problem that the single parents, and the question of the minimum wage, and how workers who are even government employees have to live from paycheck to paycheck. Those issues are not being discussed. All we are seeing is canker and bacchanal and throwing mud, slinging at one another. And we believe that has no place within a modern society. Having said that, let me make a fundamental point that the National Trade Union Center, and I want to reaffirm this publicly, right? Reaffirm that we have a fundamental principle that has always been the cornerstone of the National Trade Union Center ethos, and that is our commitment to non-partnership, right, partisanship rather, in the political landscape. So I want to get that clear, I want to get that out of the way, and we have consistently demonstrated that. Having said that, we are mindful that we operate a diverse federation which has workers in all political corners, and therefore our independence is so critical to us. And having said that, we cannot dictate or determine for any worker which political party that worker or workers want to support. That is not our business. Our business is putting the facts on the table and being non-partisan in any political landscape. But I want to make this fundamental point. You see, this independence speaks to, and we are not to, we want to maintain the freedom to criticize or support policies, and I say that in my interview, and legislation proposed by any political party based on their potential impact on our members and the poor and the voiceless and the labor movement as a whole. That is our fundamental principle. That is our ethos. That is how we operate. So that when a statement is made like that statement and it is carried in the news media, and the trade union movement, and Michael Anisette is being accused of being hypocritical because we supported UNC. As I said in my interview, and no one carried that. And if you read the whole article, you will see that the statement was misleading because the Comrade Roger made it clear that he wanted to concentrate on bread and butter issues. He also went on to say he don't want to be diverted by any other thing. But the news media insists on talking about, if you're carrying the letter to the UNC opposition, what does that mean? What does that mean in reality? That if we carry a letter to the opposition to point out what are the issues that are facing workers from the perspective of the labor movement, does that mean that we are going in bed with that political party? And we carry the very same letter to the Minister of Finance. I did not see anybody say that we're going in bed with the PNM. And one has to be careful in Trinidad and Tobago because we continue as a nation to divide the nation within this ethnicity, within political party, and within this race talk. And that is destroying the very social fabric of our society, and is something that we must veer away from. We must be able to elect whoever it is, whatever institution, be the labor movement, be political parties, whatever judges, whatever it is, on the basis of the merits that they bring to the table, and not who support which political party, whether in power or out of power. And that is the problem we have with
Mr. Anderson,
Trinidad
I think
and Tobago.
it's a fair point.
Yeah.
I think we understand that, and thank you very much for clarifying. You have said that you will support ideas. You have said you will support ideas, but you also said that people must be mindful of who they are voting for and ask themselves what the party they are voting for has done for them. Now, bear in mind, we are all entitled to our opinions. We are all allowed to express those opinions. I'm not arguing what you've said previously, but at the same time, in the context that we are in an election season, would you say that such comments could be interpreted as being political?
No, I disagree. Am I not entitled as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago and as a representative of workers to express a particular view? We hold strong to the view that you must support ideas, you must support policies, and you didn't read the whole statement. I also went on to say ideas and policy that speaks to the pensioners, that speak to the poor, that speak to the voiceless, that speak to the single mothers and parents. You did not read that part. So when you delink that aspect and you make that statement only, it may suggest to people what the question that you are asking. But I want to answer you too, that what is wrong with Michael Anizet as an individual, a citizen, and a general secretary telling the nation that when political parties, I didn't say PNM, I didn't say UNC, I didn't say NTC, I didn't say MSJ, I said when political parties come to you, you have to ask those questions and you must judge them on their ideas and what they are prepared to deliver on your behalf. That is a correct statement to make by anybody who is interested in Trinidad and Tobago, given the political landscape that we operate, that breeds division, class, ethnicity, and all the wrong ideas that continues to divide the nation and not bring us together as a people, for us to recognize that we are one, Trinidadians and Tobagoans, Africans, we are Indians, we are a party with a mix of different races, and therefore we have to put our collective wisdom together in order to work for the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago, and not any one individual political party or any one group. And I also mentioned, which you didn't mention, that the gap in income and the gap in wealth in Trinidad and Tobago is frightening, and it's something that we have to address, because we cannot continue in Trinidad and Tobago where a few people make all the money, and then the other group of people, the 99 8% are forced to work out and scrape out a living in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, Mr. Anderson, I will tell you, I do have your speech in front of me. I can't, for the sake of the time of the interview, quote every single thing, but I am aware of what you were referring to with regard to the NIB and the penalty for the retirement age, with respect to gas prices, even with respect to taxes. No, I am very much aware, but I'm asking you specific questions and adding context to it. So then, with your response in mind now, what ideas, or rather actually, have there been any ideas from any one side, proposed from any one side, or any entity for a matter of fact, that unions support and are in favor with?
No, that is why we would have written the letter to the Minister of Finance. That is why we would have given the opposition leader, all right, a copy of the said letter so that they will understand the context in which the trade union movement is operating under, because we have a deep and abiding concern over the fact that the bread and butter issues are not being addressed by any political party, whether it's a local election or not. That is not the issue. We have crime. Crime is a serious issue. And I did make the point in terms of what was articulated to solve the crime, which the labor movement disagrees with. And we are saying, and if you look at our paper, which you say you have, we raise some issues, like, for example, the NIB penalty for retiring at age 60. There are collective agreements which speaks to the retirement age of 60. And you have to engage the trade union movement. You must have a tripartite discussion involving labor, business, and government to address those issues. It is patently unfair for a minister of finance or a prime minister or every government minister to get up in the morning and make statements that affect the general population and workers that we represent without engaging us in discussion. That is a fundamental breach of the ILO principle of social dialogue, for which this government would have signed on. And in the absence of the engagement by the government, we saw it fit to write the Minister of Finance and also give a copy to the leader of the opposition so that they will be aware of what are the concerns of the labor movement and what are the concerns that you all are not addressing, right? The deep economic realities that are affecting workers, and more so pensioners and minimum wage workers, and also the government workers who would have had to see the increase in salaries and who wages are being offered, which I don't want to get into right now. But those are the issues that we see in the labor movement that must be addressed, even though it is local election. We need to understand what you will do to alleviate the economic hardship for workers, and you need to speak to the question of fairness, one, and social justice for each and every one in our society. That is the labor movement view, with the greatest of respect.
Well, Mr. Michael Anderson, thank you very much for joining me. I'm sure there's a lot more we could expand on because, yes, as I mentioned earlier, and then you just concretized it, the NIB, the retirement age, the penalty for such. You spoke about gas prices, you spoke about taxation. But for time, unfortunately, we have to conclude there. I want to thank you very much for joining me. Always a pleasure, and wishing you all the very best.
Same on this side, and as I continue to tell my people that we manifest our realities from the God within us and with the protection and guidance of our ancestors. And we have to believe in ourselves as a people. We have to aim high for a better Trinidad and Tobago for all. And that is what will carry Trinidad and Tobago to the potential and the innate ability that we have as a people and as a country. So thanks and blessings to Trinidad and Tobago, and thanks for the opportunity. I hope at the next time I'll be given much more time so that we could really do a deep dive into all those issues so that the general public will understand the thinking of the labor movement. And the labor movement is not an enemy. The labor movement is a collaborative entity for the betterment of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, thank you and blessing always, and thank you for this opportunity. I do appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson.
Irrespective of how short it was, I do appreciate it.
No, I think we could all agree.
All right.
I think we all agree on your last sentiments expressed there with regards to us always having to aim high and to be guided and make TNT a better place. But thank you very much, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, AM Prime takes a break, and when we return, we welcome our second guest this morning. Stay tuned.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, it's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had two properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
Two properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Hello and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. I apologize for the late start. It's really my fault, but nevertheless, thank you for making the time to join me this morning as we get into the conversation. Now, my first guest is here to speak about the minimum wage. As trade unions actually issued a letter, delivered a letter to the Minister of Finance last week dealing with bread and butter issues. One point that they really mentioned and stressed on in an interview I had last week as well was with regard to the minimum wage. Now, the Prime Minister has also spoken about it, but to get a better understanding as we take a look at all the pros and all the cons of an increased minimum wage, I'm joined this morning by development economist and strategist, Dr. Marlene Atts. She's with us via Zoom. Good morning, Dr. Atts. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Keaton, and good morning to Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, Dr. Atts, thank you very much for being with us this morning. In your analysis of what has been proposed by trade unions, as well as the response by the Prime Minister regarding the increase, saying it may be too difficult at this time, your assessment of both sides of the situation.
All right, thanks for the opportunity again, and I'm glad that you've asked me for an assessment. Normally when people pose this question, they ask you, do you think it's justified? And I think really we have to contextualize everything and really do an assessment. So let me just break it down. The current minimum wage is $17.50, which translates roughly into, if you look at an 8-hour day, it translates into about $140 a day, $700 a week, and $2,800 a month. So that is where we're starting with the $17.50 minimum wage conversation. If we were to increase the rate, the minimum wage rate by about 71%, which is what it turns out to be, the proposal to $30, it's about a 71% increase. That would take us to roughly $240 a day, $1,200 a week, and of course $4,800 a month. Of course, we are premising that on an 8-hour day. We're premising that on a 5-day work week, and of course, roughly 4 weeks constituting the month. So that is the context. So whether we're looking at $2,800 a month or $4,800 a month, it means that persons who fall into this category, of course, don't pay tax because of the tax rate that we have and the tax structure. So they're exempted from paying taxes. But what you also find in many of those minimum wage industries is that sometimes persons, if they're in an environment where they have to wear uniforms, for example, sometimes the company may or may not provide them with their uniforms, so they may have to pay for the uniforms. Companies in those minimum wage jobs may or may not provide for things like sick leave, which are normally part of, certainly for monthly paid workers, for example. We know that things like sick leave constitute part and parcel of the terms and conditions of employment. So sick leave may or may not be provided. And I'm using all of this as a context to say that the minimum wage really is, it's about the money, yes, but it's about the remuneration and the suite of benefits and the terms and conditions under which these persons live. Now you lay on top of the conversation, and I think we can't divorce the minimum wage conversation from what else is happening around us in the economy. So that's why I'm glad for the opportunity to do an assessment, so to speak. So you look at these minimum wage workers, whether they're earning $2,800 a month now, or whether we take it to the $30 an hour, and they will be up to $4,800 a month. You layer on top of that reality some of the considerations I've mentioned, but also the consideration that we have a conversation now about pending rate increases for public utilities, particularly the electricity and the TNTech rates. Layer on top of that some cable companies have increased their rates, so the cost of internet, et cetera, et cetera. So you're layering on top of all of that. You layer on top of this conversation the fact that the Central Statistical Office has indicated that the inflation rates have increased between 2021 and 2023. Transportation costs have increased between 2021 and 2023. You're looking at these persons who work in the minimum wage sectors. They're at the lower end of the income earning spectrum. Let us not argue about that. They have to pay the cost of transportation. Some of them have to pay rents. Even if they aren't paying rents, their domestic conditions may require them to contribute to the well-being and the running of the home and the costs incurred in running the home on a weekly, fortnightly, monthly basis, as the case might be. So I think that is the totality of the conversation. Now, the argument or the pros, as it were, of increasing the minimum wage is that you allow persons who are at the lower end of the income earning spectrum to have the opportunity to increase their standard of living. So they will now have a bit more money that they can spend on some additional things, look after their children, look after their family, look after themselves, etc., etc., etc. You also have the opportunity, if you were to increase the minimum wage, to close the income inequality gap between those persons who are the higher wage earning, minimum to higher wage earning spectrum, close that gap between those persons who are the lower wage. Remember, we're talking about $2,800 a month as opposed to probably $6,000 or $7,000 a month, and we're looking to increase that from $2,800 to about $4,800 per month. So we're looking to close that gap. That of necessity will make the persons who are at the minimum wage level feel a little better about themselves and the jobs that they're doing and the incomes, the wages that they're going to be earning. So to me, that is the totality of the conversation. Now, what will happen as well is that those persons in the minimum wage sector, with the additional income that they earn, something we call in economics the marginal propensity to consume, they're going to consume a bit more. And that in itself is going to serve as some kind of stimulus for businesses that they support, local businesses, local in their jurisdiction, in their geographic spaces. Those businesses, so they may go to the parlor and buy some more, they might go to the neighborhood supermarket and buy some more, and that will spawn some kind of growth in those sectors. But of course, there is the flip side to all of this.
Yes.
As the cost of those wages increase, the businesses are going to have to incur additional costs. And of course, what will then happen is that they either A, will pass those additional costs on to consumers, or they can do any number of other things. They can decide to reduce the number of hours that existing employees work, so that the benefit, so that whole $2,800 per month conversation that I started with, as opposed to a $4,800 a month, if it were to increase from $1,750 to $30, that may not be the reality. Employees might find themselves earning less because their employers might decide, okay, the cost has gone up, the cost of labor has gone up, so I will reduce your hours to minimize my operating costs. Because, of course, as my costs go up as an employer, it feeds into and it cuts into my profit margin, so to speak. So I might decide to do my arithmetic a little differently and either reduce your hours or, worst case, seek out a supply of labor that is likely to come in at or below the existing minimum wage, so that I can maintain my costs of labor. So it is not as easy as simply saying that, you know, you want to increase because it is going to have all of the benefits to the individual employee, but it's really actually looking at all of the possible ramifications that can come from the increase in the minimum wage. And then, of course, as the labor costs increase and those costs are passed on to the businesses, and the businesses then pass them on to the consumer, then there is a potential for an inflationary spiral to take place. So it is likely to be the case that this increase in the minimum wage can actually contribute to add to the inflationary pressures that we're witnessing in Trinidad and Tobago. And the inflationary pressures that we've been witnessing would have started during COVID-19, exacerbated by the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this could very well be an additional layer. So all of that to say that a conversation around the increase in the minimum wage really should be rooted in some research that shows, A, the number of persons who are likely to be impacted and what is likely to be the multiplier effect on the economy, depending on the labor conditions and the supply of labor. Because, as I said, it is a very real possibility that some employers might decide that, okay, if you're demanding a higher wage, minimum wage, I will therefore seek alternative sources of labor, which could come in at a cheaper cost. And then what will happen is that you will have a displacement of workers. There will be unemployment. Some persons may become unemployed, and that could cause some kind of further tensions, I should say, in the economy. So I think there has to be a more holistic approach to the conversation around the minimum wage. What are likely to be the multiplier effects, depending on the country's economic conditions. And we know that, for example, we do have migrant labor in the country, which may be willing to fill the gap, so to speak, should the minimum wage be increased. And I think I saw one business person already signaling that is a potential source of labor should the conversation around the minimum wage be advanced. But I do think that there is a need for us to have, some more data-driven empirical research in terms of guiding the conversation around the minimum wage. But there are few who will disagree that $2,800 a month is, in fact, a bit of a strain, given the prevailing circumstances in the country. I think there are few persons who would disagree that there is need for us to have a conversation around this minimum wage, a more holistic conversation.
Well, Dr. Atz, and that's quite an all-rounded analysis, and I thank you for that. And I also thank you very much for your calculations. Now, across the Caribbean, there have been consultations, please excuse me, with regards to the minimum wage. Most recently, Grenada actually, they completed their consultations and are about to issue their report to central government. Antigua and Barbuda, we've seen the Prime Minister also speaking about it. And a term keeps coming up. Minimum wage versus a livable minimum wage. What is a livable minimum wage? And I know you also just mentioned there are very few who would agree that $2,800 is a bit of a stretch. Currently, in our circumstances, would you say that $17.50 an hour is a livable minimum wage?
As I said, very few would disagree that we ought not to have a conversation around the $17.50. I think it is, I mean, persons who are tuning into this now who would have paid either their internet or their cable bills to be able to tune into your program, because they would be either streaming on social media or tuning in to a cable channel, and that is a cost they have to incur. And I think many of us who are tuning in would agree that $2,800 is not sustainable, but it has to be put into the larger context. And I certainly don't think it is a livable minimum wage. When you think about persons, I think the average wage, based on some other conversations, is about $6,000. That is what the government has predicated its tax bracket on the basis. So it's I think we've increased to $7,200.
I think it's 75, yes, yeah.
$7,200. I think we've increased it to, which of itself suggests that is the minimum wage where you will not be eligible to pay taxes. So there has to be some conversation that takes us to a space where we can imagine that $7,200 is perhaps what we can consider to be the minimum living wage for persons in Trinidad and Tobago. But of course, that conversation also has different tiers and different elements to it. Your levels of education, for example, your experience for certain kinds of jobs. And we know that persons who are at the minimum wage level would have had different educational levels of attainment, different levels of educational attainment than persons who perhaps earn $7,200 a job. So again, it is not simply a question of swinging the pendulum from $17.50 to $30 to $40 to $50 an hour, as the case might be. That has to be contextualized in terms of a person's education, what skills and experience they can bring to the table, for example. And that, I think that has to be, that again is a larger conversation. But all of these have to be predicated on what is the current state of the economy and what the economy of Trinidad and Tobago can afford. And to distinguish between Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada and Antigua Barbuda, some of the countries that you mentioned, one, there is a difference in population size.
Yes.
We're significantly larger in terms of population. We're 1.4 or thereabouts. Some of them barely make it to 100,000 in terms of their total population sizes. But also, more importantly, the source of their income. So Grenada, Antigua Barbuda, tourism-driven economies, where we've seen in the post-pandemic period, those economies are, the tourism sector is in fact picking back up in terms of visitor arrivals and international visitor arrivals particularly. But Trinidad and Tobago, of course, because we're so heavily dependent on the energy sector, and the energy sector has in fact been limping along over the last 2 years, and we would have seen over the last 2 to 3 days coming out into the media, again, suggestions that Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector is facing some challenges in terms of the gas particularly.
Mm-hmm.
So everything has to be put into context, which is why I think there is a need for us to have more robust, holistic conversations around these issues and around livelihoods and how persons' livelihoods in Trinidad and Tobago are being impacted, and what we can do collectively to improve the livelihoods of those persons who are the lower end of the spectrum in our society.
In your opinion, if we were to push forward with a data-driven analysis and, as you said, a comprehensive study, whom do you think, again, excuse me, whom do you think are the players that are necessary, or those parts of society who are crucial to such a conversation? I mean, apart from central government, of course.
Well, of course, you have the government agencies, you have the Central Statistical Office, which will provide some of the data that's required. I mean, they would do things like the household budgetary survey, they would have a sense of the different wages being paid in different sectors, they would keep track of the inflationary rates, things like the transportation costs, etc., housing costs across the country, rental rates across the country. You also have the central bank, and of course, it would be remiss of me if I didn't say that you also have the University of the West Indies, and we have capable persons within the university who can give you a whole in fact, a more holistic picture, not just the economic side of it, but certainly the sociology of it, what is happening in different spaces, what is happening in terms of persons who are living in formal and informal housing areas, for example, so that we have a full sense of where these low-income persons may be living under what conditions, but it really requires a coming together of different disciplines to get a holistic picture and then layer that, with what is happening at the macroeconomic level in terms of the overall economic conditions in Trinidad and Tobago, so that we can make reasonable and sustainable decisions in terms of how we support persons who are at the lower end of the income earning spectrum.
I think that is a very important statement you made. They're reasonable and sustainable decisions. But before we go, Dr. Atson, once more, thank you so much for joining me this morning, and especially for that deep analysis. There's already been one response from the Prime Minister, and he spoke more so about opportunity in Trinidad and Tobago, providing more opportunity. You've mentioned that our dependence on the energy industry, our energy sector is really limping. But beyond that, where else is opportunity? He's spoken a lot about relationships between the government and the private sector, public-private partnerships. But have we made serious strides or inroads in that avenue already?
Well, I'm not privy to the details of what the Prime Minister said on this particular matter. I may have missed that conversation. But I think, yes, there are opportunities, but those opportunities have to be linked to what we're educating our population for. So one of the things that we saw during COVID-19, and I use that as a benchmark, so to speak, COVID-19 essentially brought out the creativity and the innovative spirit of many Trinbagonians. So you saw a lot of people getting into food businesses, the development of apps because we were constrained in terms of our movement. So a lot of people got onto online platforms, etc., etc. But that was linked to opportunities that presented themselves during that period that would have been those opportunities that would have been nurturing and growing and developing in the background based on one's educational attainment. So while there may be opportunities there, we need to have an education system that allows for training and allows for that realization of the innate skills and competences that persons may have, so that when these opportunities present themselves, whether it's private sector, public sector, or public-private partnerships, as the case might be, persons would already have the skills and competences to allow them to capitalize and to leverage on those opportunities. So yes, there may be opportunities that exist, but we simply can't be saying that there are opportunities if we're not providing the skills and the training and the kind of human capital development that's required for us to leverage and to capitalize on those opportunities.
An all-rounded approach indeed is necessary, not just looking at one avenue and saying, once we resolve this, it's going to resolve the entire issue. Dr. Marlene Act, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been a pleasure. And again, given the circumstances, it is indeed a fruitful conversation. And I know that in future, this is going to be a topic that will rise once more. But beyond just this, I think we're going to need your analysis for other things as well. But for now, do have a great day ahead. Thank you for your time, and we'll speak again soon.
Same to you, and thank you for inviting me. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Dr. Atz. And Dr. Marlene Atz, a development economist and strategist, joining me on AM Prime this morning. As she mentioned, an all-rounded approach is needed, data-driven analysis, and she even went to suggest the players that are necessary for consultations, for conversations for that particular study, and that may not be all, but Dr. Marlene Atz certainly did us well this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, well, I'll welcome my next guest. Stay tuned.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, It's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had two properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
Two properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Welcome back to the program. My next guest joining me is to speak about local government elections, but not just about the campaign in particular, but results from a poll from the North American Caribbean Teachers Association, also known as NACTA. Now, the poll had 430 eligible voters that were interviewed at random, reflecting on the demographics of the population here in Trinidad and Tobago. The survey being coordinated by NACTA founder Dr. Vishnu Bisram. Now, the poll actually found that 70% of people will not vote in the election. Some might argue that is the usual case when it comes to local government elections. Nobody really takes it seriously. But the poll also went to suggest that neither the People's National Movement nor the United National Congress and their particular, I suppose, partnerships or alliance, however you like to refer to it, are gaining enough support to allow either of them to win one of the 7 local government corporations that each of them currently hold. Well, joining me is geopolitical analyst Dr. Shane Mohammed. He's with us via Zoom. He's actually outside the Red House this morning. Hello, Shane. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Just watching one and trying to, understand the dynamics that are playing out, because it's a bit of a different arrangement this time around compared to 2016 and 2019, which makes for some very interesting results if the various parties that are participating in the election do make an impact on the population, and that the voting population comes out, which is something that we have to also consider that may or may not happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shane, I think if you yourself are sitting around digesting it, what does that say for individuals like myself? I mean, remember, I was under your guidance at one point. But before we get into the meat of this conversation, can we actually trust these polls? I mean, do they actually mean much?
Well, this is the first time, to be quite honest, that I am paying attention, not in depth, in a very in-depth manner, because this is the first time I'm paying attention to the NACTA poll specifically, because this NACTA poll gives some level of scientific perspective with regard to how many people were polled and that sort of thing. They don't always get it right. They've not gotten it right within the recent past. But given that they spoke about the sampling that they took, I thought was interesting that they went down the scientific route, which is important. Am I taking it seriously? No. Is it under consideration? To a certain extent. Because, as I say, only because of the fact that they provided some scientific evidence as to how they came about their findings. There are going to be corporations that are going to stay within the UNC and stay within the PNM. Mm-hmm. That's a given fact. There are seats that may or may not flip. And Keaton, as you know, in local government elections, because we are dealing with electoral districts, 100 votes, 50 votes are a matter. 50 votes can make the difference between a political party winning a seat or losing it. Mm-hmm. 200 votes can make an impact in how a corporation is configured. So this makes for very interesting times. And if you listen to the people out there, they're not very happy. They're not happy with both the UNC or the PNM. But it's not as cut and dry as it was before, because in 2019 we had smaller parties, yes, but it was in most instances a straight fight between the UNC and the PNM.
Yes.
In this instance, it's not as clear-cut as it was before. We have an alliance between the UNC, the NTA, and the incorporation now, or the return, I should say, of Mr. Warner into the UNC. We have the PP and the Farmers Alliance. That should not be discounted as well, because regardless of whether you like Philip Alexander or not, he has been able to make a level of impact in people's minds and provide them with a quote-unquote reality that they're not hearing from traditional politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the PNM, who continues to be a very strong party, but there is a bit of concern with regard to the utterances of the Prime Minister within the recent past, and whether or not, and people have not, Trinidad does not understand Tobago politics, but Tobago is very much upset with the approach that the Prime Minister has taken, and they are very cautious, but they're heeding what the Chief Secretary has said in the last couple of weeks regarding the Prime Minister and the whole plot against the THA. So, and there's been a lot of editorials and a lot of commentary. In fact, the most significant input in terms of the dialogue regarding the THA and the People's National Movement I saw, which for me is very important for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to pay attention to, is that of Pastor Clive Dutton. So, we have, it's a very interesting period of time. Do I expect a very high voter turnout? No. Do I, from what I have been gathering over the last couple of weeks, young people are not going to vote. They're not coming out to vote.
Now, Dr. Moment, let me interrupt you there for a moment. You've mentioned quite a lot, and a lot of very good information. You've mentioned young people, but you've also mentioned traditional politics. Now, one of the findings of the polls suggested was an uphill task for either party to gain the support of their traditional base. Younger East Indian voters are crossing over to the People's National Movement, according to the poll, because they see limited political hope and opportunities compared to seen in the current United National Congress. The poll said there is hardly any similar ethnic crossover voters to the UNC, with Afro-Trinidadians and mixed voters turned off from some of the political personalities in the opposition camp, but it's a similar thing also being expressed by traditional People's National Movement supporters. But a lot of focus on the young people. Is it that, one, though traditional politicians are not moving away from the scene for whatever the reason may be, people are moving away from the traditional politicians and the traditional politics? And two, is it that we probably have, and without trying to sound too arrogant here, probably a bit more educated younger population, more free-thinking, liberal-minded youth in TNT that are opening their eyes and not necessarily floating to the traditional base of which their families support?
You've used a very important word in your discussion and in your questions, and that is the word called opportunity. And that's a very dangerous word in political science, because in political science we talk about ideology,
yes,
philosophy, and belief systems, right? Nowhere in political science do we ever speak about opportunity. People follow political parties because of a belief system, because of values, because of philosophy, because of ideology. And here we are in 2023 in Trinidad and Tobago, where we introduced the word opportunity. And when people start moving towards a political organization because of an opportunity, it doesn't necessarily mean that they subscribe to a political party's ideology, philosophy, and belief systems, but they are looking after themselves. And they're looking after themselves because there's a need a need to serve. There's a desire to serve, I should say. 2, and the fact that so many young people have shifted to the PNM is because the PNM has a more structured and more stable, but more importantly, a more structured format in which it selects its candidates. For the longest time that we can remember, the PNM has been trying its best to diversify the party and move away from the traditional perspective and the traditional belief that the PNM is just simply a party for Afro and Afro-Trinbagonians. And we've seen that move but over the years by various leaders. The most significant has been that when Mr. Manning was in power. We are now seeing that Dr. Rowley is doing the very same thing. The question arises, though, do these young people, and as you say, these traditional East Indian voters that have shifted towards the PNM, how many of them, we need to calculate how many of them has the chance of winning the seats that they are contesting, because they are also contesting seats in traditional UNC seats, right? So that's one question that must be asked. And even if they are successful, or let's just say unsuccessful in their quest to serve, how many of them can be afforded an opportunity in the People's National Movement for continuity and to be able to sustain their desire to serve the country? And opportunity should not be about self. The opportunity to serve is what is important, especially in politics and political science. The opportunity must be an opportunity to serve the people, to make a difference in one's community, to serve one's community members, to serve their villages, their towns. It should never be about serving because of self, because also in political science we teach about servant leadership, and it's about giving yourself to the people of a nation, and in this instance the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So, it's a very, I wouldn't say dangerous, but I feel it's a very it's not the essence of true politics as we learn it and we know it to be. And then people will come and say to me, well, time has changed and the essence of true politics has changed because politics has a minor morality of its own. Yes, politics does have a morality of its own, as for Machiavelli, yes, and as for the Machiavellian style of politics. And I am the first person to say that I do subscribe to the Machiavellian style of politics because it's politics in its truth and real, the most real form. But on the flip side, you have the UNC. I listened to Mrs. Prasad Bissessa. It had to be when she had that joint meeting and Mr. Warner went back, mounted the platform. And I will say to you what I've said to every single media house out there. In her speech, she talked about the web that has been weaved by Dr. Rowley. And she said, oh, what a tangle web we weave. And it caught my attention because I said to myself, lady, you should speak about, you shouldn't talk about what a tangle web you weave. Dr. Rowley has weaved, but you should really concentrate on what a tangled web you have weaved. Because had you not weaved that tangled web, Mr. Warner should not have left the UNC in the first place, nor should have Mr. Griffith left the UNC in the first place. And had that web not been weaved and not been weaved out of control, you may still have been in government today, and your party may have been even stronger than it was in 2010.
Well, what do you think is the impact of those two individuals? Now, on one hand, you have Mr. Griffith, who's the political leader of a new political entity. On the other hand, you have Mr. Jack Warner, who has now disbanded the ILP. It's now part of the United National Congress. But what is the impact of these two individuals joining with the United National Congress, and how would people react to that?
Well, I think most people, most traditional voters and most members of the UNC, traditional members of the UNC, are elated at the fact that Mr. Warner has returned, because they will not say it the way I have said it, because but they are excited and jubilant by the fact that Mr. Warner has come back to the party. Mainly because Mr. Warner brought to the United National Congress a sense of stability, a sense of organization, a sense of structure. In fact, if you look at that Center of Excellence meeting that was done, that was Mr. Warner's production in every sense of the word, from the styling of the stage to the formatting of the music to how people spoke. Back in the day, everybody knew that Mr. Warner was responsible for ensuring that the meetings and the political platforms and the flow of speakers and all that was very well organized and put together. So it was very much reminiscent of what he's capable of doing in terms of party structure and organization. That's one. But also that Mr. Warner is he's a charismatic speaker. You cannot deny the fact that he's has been always, not just now, but always, an invigorator of the crowd and an excellent political orator. So much so that coming before Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, I thought that she would have been prepared to feed off of the energy that he would have left on the platform, and provide a speech or give a speech that was extremely inspiring and all-embracing, and one that would have jolted the minds of those that are in doubt to maybe rethink their position.
Mm-hmm.
But then she descended into speaking to the traditional voters and speaking to people and saying things like she has elevated the children of the party, and the children of the UNC has been moved from councillors to members of parliament, etc., etc., and that in our deepest, darkest hours that she did not forget that it is the loyalists of the party that stood by her and defended the party. And I am saying to myself, what exactly are you doing, lady? What are you, you are literally, you have Mr. Warner sitting in front of you. He has dissolved the ILP. He has taken 10 years before he came back to the UNC. And a UNC that he should have never left in the first place, but for your tangled web that you weaved and was unable to control. And you are here talking about, deepest, darkest hours, you continue to remember those that stood with you in the vineyard. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It's a slap in the face to even Mr. Warner and anyone who is thinking about returning to the UNC, because the UNC is not only about the traditional voters, the UNC is also about the swing voters, the marginal seat voters, the young people, the young professionals, the independent thinkers. That's what the UNC should be running after.
So what we're really seeing taking place is, once more, drumming up that support within the traditional base, as you've mentioned, but no concrete efforts, no real efforts that we can argue of bringing new support, of bringing new minds to the party, bringing in a wider support base to the party. We're just seeing them trying to clasp onto the support that they've already had, or probably losing, if that's the case.
That may very well be the job of Mr. Warner and Mr. Griffith. They may very well be charged with the responsibility of drumming up support from the traditional voters, from the marginal seat voters, the swing voters, the young professionals. There are also a group of young people who do not understand the political history across the board of Trinidad and Tobago. So they will not understand the value of Mr. Warner. And people may be confused. Well, you know, what is the big deal about young people, especially may wonder what is the big deal about Mr. Warner returning to the party. And that is for also the political party itself, the UNC, to explain, to be honest and explain to the young voters and the people that they are trying to attract what is the value that Mr. Warner brings to the party and the contribution that he's made over the years to the United National Congress, which nobody can dispute. And if we are teaching political science, and one of the things you would know, Keaton, is that political parties are charged with the responsibility of providing information. Not just, it's not their responsibility, their sole responsibility is, according to Machiavelli, to win elections and to sustain power and that sort of thing. But part of that is also about teaching the young people and teaching those that are not, that don't know what is the value of Mr. Warner to a stage, or what is the value of Mr. Warner to a political party. And you know, between the period 20, not even, it is even prior to 2010, I could go all the way back to 2007, when there was a split between the COP and the UNC. Mr. Warner played a pivotal role in trying to gauge an accommodation and try to pull the parties together to say, let's see, you know, if we can work together. It didn't work in 2007, but the opportunity came again in 2010, and he was very much front and center and very much a part of that coming together of people's ideologies, philosophies, and putting it into one big framework where everybody got an equal say, and everybody got a chance to express their views and that sort of thing. When Mr. Warner left in 2013 and was, you know, so disrespectfully removed from the partnership's cabinet and then the United National Congress, we saw what the results of that was.
So, Dr. Mohammed, before, I'm so sorry, we're running out of time, but I have to slip in one more question, and that is whether or not we see the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago becoming apathetic to politics, because the relationship, I suppose, between the People's National Movement and the United National Congress, both parties have decided to take this combative approach to politics. Do you think that the population is disgusted by this lack of cooperation between both parties? I mean, it's really, you see that happening all the time with opposition parties and the sitting government. But this combative, hardline approach from both political parties, do you think that has caused the population to become apathetic towards politics?
Apathetic is an understatement. They're not only apathetic, they're disgusted, they're frustrated, they're fed up, and all the other adjectives that goes with those words. I can safely say that this is the worst that our democracy has seen as it pertains to two political parties functioning in the Red House. There's no level of cooperation. There's no attempts to bridge the gap. The Prime Minister has his belief system about the UNC and the opposition. He was very steadfast in it, and he's not willing to even try to mend a bridge. When the UNC says it is willing to assist, there's a doubt as to their genuinity and their commitment to assisting, because quite often they meet and then that meeting falls apart because there's a disagreement and they can't meet a middle ground. There's no set of political negotiations between the both political leaders. There's a huge level of arrogance that exists with regard to the leadership of both parties. I would even go down the road to say, unfortunately, sometimes you see a level of hatred that should never happen. Because if you look, we have two very clear persons that we could refer to and make reference to with regard to how they operated in the parliament and even in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is the relationship between Mr. Manning and Mr. Pandey. And they both agreed that even, and Mr. Pandey had said it, he said in politics and in the Red House, they were political enemies. But outside of that, they were both citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and leaders of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And outside of that political setting, they were in fact friends.
Yes.
And what we have to remember is that we must be able to have differences of opinions, we must have differences of ideologies and philosophies, but at the end of the day, it is the welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that matters most, and that is what should unite us. And that the welfare and the betterment of the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago across the board, whether they come from the upper echelons of the society to down to the bottom, down where people are struggling to make ends meet, we should be focusing on how we can improve lives and livelihoods across the board. And our policies should be able to align. Where we disagree, we should be able to sit down and talk about it and have a discussion about it and meet and have a middle ground. When it comes to legislation and laws, we should be open-minded because not everyone is going to get it right. And we saw that with the procurement legislation. So therefore, we should be able, as mature politicians over the years, especially Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa and Dr. Rowley, having served in the Parliament for so many years, having served in so many different administrations and in different roles and capacities within their political parties and within the Parliament, they should be able to have the wisdom and the understanding to sit down and discuss the people's business in a manner that is not divisive and is not adversarial, because the adversarial approach is only going to take us into a deadlock, and that is where we are today. And the option to that, deadlock and that the frustration, apathy, the feeling of fed up, the feeling of despair, hopelessness, may only arise if a new political party comes on board and provides the people of Trinidad and Tobago with a very strong alternative and a very modern way of thinking about politics in Trinidad and Tobago.
Dr. Shane Mohammed, I think that's a great way to end the discussion, and I suppose just to give a trailer to part 2, where we have to speak about smaller political parties and the rise, I suppose, because one of the other suggestions from the poll is that younger people are swaying more so to these smaller political parties. So we do have to have that discussion, but let's pause there for now. I want to thank you very much for your analysis this morning, and we'll be in contact for part 2 very soon. Hopefully this week actually we can have that conversation. But for now, Dr. Mohammed, appreciate it. Do have a great day ahead and all the very best.
Thank you so much, Keaton. You too.
And by the way, you've raised some memories there. I would encourage anybody who gets the opportunity to read The Prince by Machiavelli to do so.
I agree.
Dr. Shane Mohammed joining us once more on AM Prime this morning, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for this edition of the program. Wishing you a grand day ahead, a great one actually, and happy Emancipation Day to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, to all who are celebrating and taking part in this the festivities surrounding Emancipation Day, as well as the commemorations, and of course the tribute to Lord Relator as well, who is part of the Emancipation Support Committee's, I suppose, celebrations and festivities with regard to Emancipation Day. So Emancipation Day greetings to all across TNT from AM Prime and from WESN Content Capital. Thank you for making the time to join me this morning. I'm Keaton Shaw. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
WESN.
I'm Andre Elbertis, and you're watching WESN, the Content Capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it.
It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there. Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day. Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back 3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow named Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
As you age, there is an increased risk of being diagnosed with arthritis, but younger individuals can get affected as well.
When you tell them, but no, I need you to move your joints. You need to move it, otherwise it gets stiffer and it exacerbates the problem. There's that misconception that if I move it, it's more pain.
So if you're to focus on these risk factors, then to me, it will help a large portion of the population, probably prolong, I should say, the inevitable, because inevitably you will develop arthritis.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform